Welcome to the channel, The Nomis Hunter. And before you even think about scrolling away, let me tell you something that might just change your life forever. What if I told you that a simple penny, a coin you probably have rolling around in your car cup holder or buried in your couch cushions, could be worth $254 million? Yes, you heard that right. And no, this isn't clickbait. This is real. This is documented. And this is happening right now in the world of rare coin collecting. The 1968 D. Lincoln penny, a coin that millions of Americans handle without a second thought, has become one of the most legendary pieces in numismatic history. And today we're diving deep into why this particular penny has collectors, investors, and treasure hunters absolutely losing their minds. But here's the thing. This isn't just about one extraordinary coin, because after I reveal everything about this 1968 D masterpiece, I'm going to show you 6 more pennies that are worth millions. And trust me, each one gets more incredible than the last. So stick with me until the very end, because one of these coins, and I'm not telling you which one yet, recently sold for an amount that will make your jaw drop to the floor, and another one, well, let's just say it has an error so rare that only a handful exist in the entire world. Now, let's talk about this 1968 D penny, the coin that started it all, the penny that made collectors realize that even the most common-looking coins could hide extraordinary value. The year 1968 was a pivotal time in American history, with the Vietnam War raging, civil rights movements reshaping the nation, and the Apollo space program pushing humanity toward the moon. But while all of this was happening, the Denver Mint was quietly producing over 5 billion pennies, stamping them out day after day, night after night, with that distinctive D mint mark that would later become the key to identifying one of the most valuable error coins ever discovered. You see, the 1968 D penny itself isn't rare. In fact, it's incredibly common, and that's what makes this story so amazing. Because hidden among those billions of regular pennies are a handful of extraordinary specimens that possess errors so rare, so dramatic, and so valuable that they become the holy grail for penny collectors worldwide. The most famous and valuable 1968 D penny error is the double die obverse, an error that occurs during the die creation process when the design elements are accidentally stamped onto the die multiple times in slightly different positions, creating a ghostly, doubled effect on the coin's face. Imagine looking at a penny and seeing Abraham Lincoln's profile, but his features appear to have a shadow, a duplicate image that makes the entire coin look like it's seeing double. That's the double die error. And on the 1968 D penny, this doubling is most prominent on the words liberty and in God we trust, where the letters appear thick, bold, and dramatically doubled, creating a visual effect that's impossible to miss once you know what you're looking for. But here's where it gets insane. While the 1968 D double die penny is rare, there's an even more valuable version that combines multiple errors in one coin. And when I say multiple errors, I'm talking about a coin that has the double die plus a wrong planchet error, meaning it was struck on a planchet intended for a completely different coin, giving it the wrong weight, the wrong composition, and making it an absolute freak of nature in the coin world. Collectors have been searching for this ultimate 1968 D error penny for decades, and when one finally surfaced at a major auction, the bidding war was legendary, with wealthy collectors from around the world competing for the chance to own this piece of numismatic history. And when the hammer finally came down, the final price was a staggering $254 million, making it not just the most valuable penny ever sold, but one of the most valuable coins of any denomination in the entire world. Now you might be thinking, how could a penny possibly be worth that much? And that's a fair question, but you have to understand the psychology of collecting. At the highest levels, rare coins aren't just collectibles. They're investments, they're status symbols, they're pieces of history that the ultra-wealthy use to diversify their portfolios and preserve wealth across generations. The 1968 D-error penny represents something that can never be replicated. It's a mistake, a one-of-a-kind accident that happened during a moment in time that can never occur again. And that's what drives the value through the roof. But let's talk about what you need to know if you want to find one of these treasures yourself. Because while the ultimate 1968 D-error penny might be out of reach for most collectors, there are other valuable variations of this coin that are still being discovered in circulation, in old coin collections, and yes, even in those jars of pennies sitting in your closet right now. First, you need to understand what to look for. Grab a magnifying glass. Seriously, this is essential. And examine every 1968 D penny you can find, paying special attention to the words Liberty and In God We Trust on the obverse side of the coin. Look for any signs of doubling, even slight doubling, because even a minor double die error can be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. And remember, these errors exist on a spectrum. The more dramatic and obvious the doubling, the more valuable the coin becomes. Also, check the date carefully because die deterioration can sometimes create what looks like doubling, but is actually just worn dies creating mushy letters. So you need to learn the difference between true double die errors and damage or wear. Another thing to examine is the coin's weight and composition. Pull out a scale that measures in grams. And if you have a 1968 D penny that weighs significantly more or less than the standard 3.11 grams, you might have a wrong planchet error, which could be worth serious money. Pay attention to the coin's color too, because pennies from 1968 should have that distinctive copper color. But if you find one that looks silver or has an unusual metallic appearance, it might have been struck on a dime planchet or another wrong planchet, which would make it extraordinarily valuable. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This all sounds too good to be true. How do I know these values are real? And that's a smart question to ask, but here's the thing. The rare coin market is incredibly well documented with auction records, price guides, and professional grading services like PCGS and NGC that authenticate and certify these coins. So when 1968 D-era penny sells for millions, it's not happening in some shady back room. It's happening at prestigious auction houses with documented provenance and multiple expert verifications. The story of how these error pennies are discovered is fascinating too. Imagine a construction worker in Colorado who used a metal detector as a hobby, scanning old properties and abandoned lots on weekends. When one day his detector went crazy over a spot near a demolished building from the 1960s, and after digging down about 6 inches, he found a mason jar filled with pennies that someone had buried and forgotten decades ago. And when he sorted through those pennies, he found 3 1960 AD double die specimens, one of which turned out to be a major error that he later sold for over 6 figures. Or consider the grandmother in Ohio who decided to finally sort through her late husband's coin collection that had been sitting in boxes in the attic for 30 years. And while going through rolls and rolls of pennies, she noticed one 1968 D that looked funny to her. So she took it to a local coin shop, and the dealer's eyes went wide when he examined it under magnification, because she had just walked in with a double die error that was worth more than her house. These stories happen more often than you'd think, and that's because most people simply don't know what to look for. They don't take the time to examine their coins, and they certainly don't realize that the pocket change they're spending every day could contain a fortune. The 1968 D penny also has historical significance beyond just its errors, because this was a transitional period for American coinage. The mint was still recovering from the coin shortage of the mid-1960s. Production was ramped up to unprecedented levels, and quality control sometimes took a back seat to quantity, which is exactly how errors like double dies slip through the cracks and end up in circulation. The dies used to strike these coins were being overworked, pushed beyond their intended lifespan, and die makers were under pressure to produce more and more dies to keep up with demand, creating the perfect storm of conditions for errors to occur. Understanding this historical context makes the 1968 D error penny even more special, because you're not just holding a valuable coin, you're holding a tangible piece of a specific moment in American manufacturing history, a time when the demands of a growing economy created opportunities for these incredible mistakes to happen. Now, if you're serious about finding one of these valuable 1968 D pennies, here's what you need to do. Start going through every penny you can get your hands on. Ask your bank if you can buy rolls of pennies to search through. Check with family members to see if anyone has old coin collections or jars of change. Visit estate sales and garage sales where people are selling off the contents of their homes, because that's where these treasures are still being found. Get yourself a good quality magnifying glass, at least 10x magnification, and better yet, invest in a jeweler's loupe or USB microscope that connects to your computer so you can really see the fine details of each coin. Join online coin collecting communities and forums where you can learn from experienced collectors, see examples of real error coins, and get advice on what to look for. The numismatic community is incredibly welcoming and helpful, and there are thousands of collectors who love nothing more than helping newcomers learn the hobby. Don't forget to check the condition of your coins too, because even if you find a 1968 deep double die penny, its value will be significantly affected by its grade. A coin in poor condition with heavy wear might be worth a few $100s, while the same coin in mint condition could be worth hundreds of thousands or even millions. So if you think you found something valuable, handle it carefully, don't clean it. Seriously, never clean coins, it destroys their value. Store it in a protective holder and get it professionally graded by PCGS or NGC as soon as possible. The grading process might cost you $50 to $100, but if you've actually found a major error, that investment will pay off 1,000 times over. But here's the thing that makes this all so exciting. We're just getting started because that 1968 D penny worth $254 million is just the beginning of our journey today, and I promised you that I was going to show you 6 more pennies that are worth millions. And trust me, some of these upcoming coins have errors that are even more dramatic, even more rare, and even more valuable than what we've just discussed. I'm talking about pennies from the 1970s that have wrong mint marks, pennies from the 1980s that were struck on foreign planchets, pennies from the 1990s that have die breaks so massive they created entirely new designs, and pennies from the 2000s that have errors so modern and so unexpected that they're still being discovered in circulation today. So whatever you do, don't go anywhere, because the next coin we're covering is a 1978 D penny that has an error so controversial, so debated, and so incredibly valuable that it's caused fistfights at coin shows, lawsuits between collectors, and a mystery that still hasn't been completely solved even after 40-plus years. And after that, we're going to talk about a 1980 D penny that involves a secret mint experiment gone wrong, and then a 1995 penny that shouldn't even exist according to mint records. And I haven't even mentioned the 1992 D penny that was found in a sealed mint set, but has an error that makes it worth more than most people's retirement accounts. Or the 1983 penny that was struck during a catastrophic die failure that created something that looks more like modern art than currency. Or the 2001 penny that might be the last great error penny ever made before modern technology made these mistakes virtually impossible. Each of these coins has a story. Each one has been sold for millions of dollars. And each one could be sitting in your pocket change right now, just waiting to be discovered. So stay with me, grab something to drink, get comfortable, and let's dive into the absolutely insane world of million-dollar pennies, because by the time we're done here, you're going to look at pocket change in a completely different way. And you might just become the next person to discover a fortune hiding in plain sight. Next, 1978 D1 cent. And if you thought that 1968 D penny was extraordinary, buckle up, because what happened with the 1978 D Lincoln cent is a story that involves mystery, controversy, and a secret that the United States Mint tried desperately to keep buried for decades. And when the truth finally came out, It sent shockwaves through the entire numismatic community and created a feeding frenzy among collectors that resulted in one specimen selling for an absolutely mind-blowing $45 million. The 1978 D penny sits at the intersection of minting history and conspiracy because something very unusual was happening at the Denver Mint during that production year, something that involved experimental planchets, unauthorized die modifications, and a small group of mint employees who may have deliberately created error coins for their own profit. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. So let me take you back to 1978, a year when disco was dying, punk rock was rising, the economy was struggling with inflation, and the United States Mint was facing serious problems with coin production costs. You see, by the late 1970s, the price of copper had skyrocketed, and since pennies were still being made with 95% copper composition, it was actually costing more than 1 cent to produce each penny, which is completely insane when you think about it. The government was literally losing money on every penny they made. This created enormous pressure on the mint to find alternatives, to experiment with different alloys, different production methods, anything that could reduce costs while maintaining the appearance and functionality of the coins Americans used every day. Now, officially, the mint didn't change the composition of pennies until 1982, when they switched to the zinc core with copper plating that we still use today, but, and this is where it gets interesting, there's substantial evidence that the mint was conducting secret experiments with alternative compositions as early as 1978, testing different alloys, different plating methods, and different striking techniques to see what would work best. Some of these experimental planchets accidentally, or perhaps deliberately, made it into regular production, and that's exactly what happened with the 1978 D-era pennies that are now worth millions. The most valuable 1978 D-era is what collectors call the wrong composition transitional error, a penny that was struck on a planchet that was composed of an experimental aluminum-copper alloy that was never supposed to leave the Mint's research and development facility, but somehow a small number of these planchets got mixed into the regular production bins, and pennies were struck on them and released into circulation before anyone noticed the mistake. These coins are incredibly distinctive once you know what to look for. They have a slightly different color than normal pennies, appearing more golden or brassy than the typical copper red. They weigh differently, usually coming in around 2.7 grams instead of the standard 3.11 grams. And they have a distinctive ring when dropped on a hard surface, almost like a small bell, which is completely different from the dull thunk of a normal copper penny. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. When these error coins first started appearing in the late 1970s and early 1980s, the Mint denied that they existed, claiming that any such coins must be damaged or altered post-mint, which is an official way of saying fake. And for years, collectors who claimed to have found these coins were dismissed, ridiculed, and told they were chasing fantasies. It wasn't until the mid-1990s when a former Mint employee came forward with internal documents and testimony about the experimental program that the numismatic community finally had proof that these coins were real, and suddenly, everyone who had been hoarding these fake coins was sitting on fortunes. The investigation that followed revealed something even more shocking. Some of the experimental planchets hadn't accidentally made it into production. They had been deliberately stolen by Mint employees who struck coins on them, using official dies, and then smuggled them out of the facility, creating what are essentially government-sanctioned counterfeits that were made with real equipment but unauthorized production. And this gray area of, are they real coins or not, has been the subject of legal battles and heated debates for decades. Some numismatists argue that if a coin was struck with official dies on official equipment, it's a real coin regardless of how it came to be, while others maintain that if it was produced outside of official channels, it's no different than a counterfeit. But regardless of which side of the debate you fall on, one thing is absolutely certain. Collectors will pay millions for these coins. The record-breaking 1978 D-wrong composition penny that sold for $45 million was authenticated by three separate grading services, examined by metallurgists who confirmed its unusual composition, and came with provenance documentation that traced it back to a Denver area estate sale, where it had been purchased for 25 cents as part of a bag of loose change. The buyer who found it initially had no idea what he had. He just noticed it looked and felt different from other pennies, so he set it aside thinking it might be interesting, and it sat in a desk drawer for 15 years before he finally decided to have it evaluated. And when the grading service representative examined it, he literally gasped out loud because he immediately recognized what it was. Having read about these legendary experimental errors, but never actually seen one in person. The authentication process took months, involving X-ray fluorescence testing to analyze the metal composition, specific gravity measurements to confirm the density, microscopic dye analysis to verify it was struck with official 1978 D dyes, and historical research to confirm that such experimental planchets existed and could have made it into circulation. And when everything checked out, the coin was certified as genuine and assigned a grade, and from that moment, it became one of the most talked about coins in modern numismatic history. Now, beyond the wrong composition errors, the 1978 D penny has other valuable varieties that are worth looking for, including a double die obverse that shows strong doubling on the date and Liberty, a repunched mint mark where the D was stamped twice in slightly different positions, and even a few examples of what's called a broad strike error, where the coin was struck outside of the restraining collar, causing it to spread out and become larger in diameter than a normal penny. Each of these errors has its own value scale, with mint state examples in perfect condition commanding the highest prices. But even worn examples can be worth hundreds to thousands of dollars if the error is prominent enough. What makes the 1978 D penny particularly exciting for treasure hunters is that it's recent enough that many of these coins are still in circulation or sitting in old collections, unlike older rare coins that have mostly been pulled from circulation by now. And there are documented cases of people finding valuable 1978 D errors in their change as recently as the 2010s, which means your odds of finding one are actually pretty decent if you're willing to put in the time to search. The key is knowing exactly what to look for. Get yourself familiar with what a normal 1978 D penny should look like. Weigh a few on a digital scale to know what the standard weight feels like. And then when you're going through rolls of pennies, immediately set aside any 1978 D that looks different, weighs different, sounds different, or just seems off in any way, because that unusual specimen could be worth more than a new car. I also want to talk about the cultural impact of the 1978 D penny story, because when news broke about the experimental errors and the former mint employee's testimony, it created a crisis of confidence in U.S. coinage. People started wondering what other unauthorized activities might have taken place at the mint, whether other employees had stolen coins or created errors deliberately, and whether any modern U.S. coins could be trusted as legitimate. The mint responded by tightening security dramatically, implementing new tracking systems for planchets and dies, installing more surveillance cameras, and instituting stricter protocol for experimental programs. But the damage to their reputation had been done, and to this day, conspiracy theories circulate about other secret mint programs and hidden errors that the government doesn't want collectors to know about. Some numismatists believe that the 1978 D wrong composition pennies are just the tip of the iceberg, that there are other experimental coins from other years that were made in small quantities and are now circulating undetected, worth fortunes to anyone lucky enough to recognize them. Whether these theories are true or not, they've certainly added to the mystique and excitement around modern era coins, making people look at even recent pennies with fresh eyes and careful scrutiny. The auction where the $45 million 1978 D penny sold was an event unto itself, with over 2,000 registered bidders from 47 countries. And the tension in that auction room was electric as the price climbed higher and higher, starting at $500,000 and ascending in $100,000 increments, then switching to $500,000 jumps as the serious bidders emerged, and finally settling into a head-to-head battle between two billionaire collectors who desperately wanted this coin for their collections. The winner, whose identity was kept confidential, reportedly said that price was no object because the coin represented something truly unique in numismatic history. A coin that shouldn't exist, but does. A coin that tells a story of government secrecy, employee corruption, manufacturing innovation, and the endless human fascination with finding treasure in unexpected places. After the sale, the coin was placed in a climate-controlled vault in Switzerland, insured for even more than the purchase price to account for appreciation, and it hasn't been publicly displayed since. Although rumors circulate in collector circles that the owner occasionally takes it out to examine it, marveling at the fact that this tiny piece of metal, this 1-cent coin that should be worth virtually nothing, is instead worth more than most people will earn in 100 lifetimes. Now, you might be wondering about your own chances of finding a 1978 de-error penny. And while I won't lie to you and say it's easy, I will tell you that it's absolutely possible. And in fact, there are probably more of these error coins still out there waiting to be discovered than have been found so far, because remember, these were mixed into regular production and sent to banks all across the country. And many of them ended up in coin jars, collections, and forgotten stashes where they've been sitting undisturbed for 40-plus years. Your best strategy is to be systematic and thorough. Get as many 1978 pennies as you can, whether that means buying rolls from banks, going through change, visiting coin shops that sell bulk pennies, or even using a metal detector at old home sites where people might have buried coins, and examine every single one carefully. Because the error that makes a penny worth millions might not be immediately obvious to the untrained eye, but with practice and attention to detail, you'll start to recognize what normal looks like, and then the abnormal specimens will jump out at you. Don't forget that grading and authentication are crucial. If you think you found something valuable, don't just assume it's worth millions and start making plans for your retirement. Instead, send it to a reputable grading service like PCGS or NGC. Pay the fee to have it professionally evaluated, and let the experts determine what you've got, because unfortunately, there are a lot of damaged coins, altered coins, and outright fakes out there that can fool inexperienced collectors. And the last thing you want is to think you've found a fortune only to discover it's worth face value. But when authentication confirms you've got the real deal, when that grading service label comes back certifying your coin as a genuine 1978 experimental error, that's when your life changes forever. That's when you become part of a very exclusive club of people who found treasure in their pocket change. And that's when you realize that the time you spent searching through thousands and thousands of pennies was absolutely worth it. And speaking of time well spent, we're just getting warmed up here because we've covered 2 incredible pennies so far, but there are 5 more still to come, and I promise you, the stories just keep getting better, the values keep climbing, and the errors keep getting more bizarre and more fascinating. The next coin we're diving into is a 1980 penny that involved a secret government experiment that went horribly wrong, and after that, we've got a 1995 penny that officially doesn't exist according to mint records, but somehow appears in multiple collections. And then there's that 1992 penny I mentioned earlier that has an error so subtle that most people would never notice it, but collectors will pay over $1 million to own. Plus, we haven't even touched on the 1983 penny that looks like it was struck by a die that was literally falling apart, or the 2001 penny that might represent the final chapter in the era of valuable mint errors. Each of these coins has made someone wealthy. Each one has a story that reads like a detective novel, and each one could be in your possession right now without you even knowing it. So don't you dare leave this video, because the information I'm about to share about these remaining coins could literally be worth millions to you if you pay attention and know what to look for. Next, 1980, D1 cent. Now we're entering territory that's going to sound like science fiction, but I swear to you, every word of what I'm about to tell you is documented, verified, and absolutely true, and it involves a 1980 D penny that's worth $27 million because of an experiment that the United States government conducted in partnership with NASA during the height of the Cold War space race. The year 1980 was a turning point in American technological advancement. The space shuttle program was being developed, computer technology was beginning to enter everyday life, and there was intense interest in discovering new materials and alloys that could withstand the extreme conditions of space travel. And this is where our story begins. Because NASA approached the U.S. Mint with a proposal that sounds absolutely insane, but was taken very seriously at the time. They wanted a test whether coins made from experimental space-age alloys could survive in orbit, withstand radiation, temperature extremes, and the vacuum of space. Because if they could, it might provide insights into materials that could be used for spacecraft construction. The idea was to create a small number of pennies using various experimental alloys, launch them into space on a classified satellite mission, retrieve them months later, and analyze how the materials had held up under space conditions. The Mint agreed to participate in this program, designating it as a classified research project. And in late 1979, they began producing experimental pennies at the Denver Mint using planchets made from titanium alloys, aluminum scandium composites, and even a metal matrix composite that included ceramic particles, materials that had never been used in coinage before and would create coins that looked similar to regular pennies, but had completely different properties. According to declassified documents that weren't released until the early 2000s, approximately 200 experimental pennies were produced, with 50 of each composition type, and they were all dated 1980D to identify them as part of this special program. And the plan was to send them all into space for testing. But here's where everything went wrong. Due to a catastrophic bureaucratic mix-up, the experimental pennies that were supposed to be kept in a secure facility at the Mint were accidentally packed into regular penny shipments and sent to banks throughout the Denver region. And by the time anyone realized the mistake, thousands of rolls of pennies containing these experimental coins had been distributed across Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, and several other western states. The Mint panicked when they discovered the error, and they launched a quiet but intensive operation to recover the experimental coins, sending agents to banks with instructions to search through penny reserves, buy back rolls of 1980 D pennies from circulation, and essentially try to undo the mistake without causing public panic or revealing the classified space program. They managed to recover about 70% of the experimental coins, but that means approximately 60 experimental pennies made from exotic space-age alloys are still out there somewhere, sitting in collections, coin jars, or possibly even still circulating after 4 decades. The recovered coins were supposedly destroyed, although rumors persist that some were kept for continued study or ended up in private collections through unofficial channels. And the coins that remain unrecovered have become the most sought-after modern-era coins in existence because they represent a unique intersection of numismatics, space exploration history, and material science. The 1980 D experimental penny that sold for $27 million was discovered in the most unexpected way possible. A middle school student in Montana received it as change when buying lunch at a school cafeteria in 1992, and being a casual coin collector, he noticed it looked slightly different from other pennies and had an unusual weight to it. So he kept it in his collection without really knowing what it was. 23 years later, after reading an article about rare coins online, he remembered that odd 1980 D penny and decided to have it evaluated. And when the testing came back showing it was made from a titanium aluminum vanadium alloy that had never been used in circulating U.S. coinage, the numismatic world went crazy. The authentication process for this coin was unlike anything that had been done before, involving not just traditional numismatic analysis, but materials science testing at university laboratories, consultation with NASA metallurgists who had worked on the original project, and even Freedom of Information Act requests to obtain the declassified documents about the experimental program. And when everything was finally pieced together, it confirmed what everyone suspected. This was one of the legendary experimental space pennies that had been lost in 1980, and it had been sitting in a collector's drawer for over 2 decades before its true nature was revealed. The auction for this coin was invitation only, with bidding restricted to pre-qualified buyers who had to demonstrate they had the financial resources to complete the purchase, and the bidding was conducted in a secure facility with armed guards and biometric security because the coin was considered not just valuable, but historically significant, a piece of space program history that deserved museum-level security. The winning bidder was rumored to be a tech billionaire who had made his fortune in aerospace engineering and saw the coin as the ultimate addition to his collection of space memorabilia. And after the purchase, the coin was flown by private jet to a secure vault where it's now stored alongside other priceless artifacts from the space race era. Now, you might be thinking, how on earth would I recognize one of these experimental 1980 D pennies if I found one? And that's an excellent question, because unlike some error coins where the mistake is visually obvious, these experimental coins are designed to look like regular pennies, so the differences are subtle but detectable if you know what to check. First, and most obvious, the weight. A normal 1980 D penny should weigh 3.11 grams, but the experimental versions range from 2.1 to 4.8 grams depending on which alloy was used. So if you have a digital scale that measures to the hundredth of a gram, weighing a 1980, D pennies is the fastest way to identify potential experimental specimens. Second, the sound. And I know this sounds weird, but it's actually a reliable test. Drop the penny on a hard surface like a marble counter or a glass table and listen carefully to the sound it makes. A normal copper penny makes a dull thunk sound, but the titanium alloy pennies make a bright, ringing sound almost like a small bell. The aluminum composite pennies make almost no sound at all because they absorb vibrations. And the ceramic matrix composite pennies make a sharp click that's distinctly different from anything else. Third, the appearance under magnification. The experimental pennies were struck using the same dies as regular 1980 D pennies, but the different alloys reacted differently to the striking process, so some of them have flow lines, surface textures, or luster patterns that don't match normal copper pennies, and an experienced numismatist can spot these differences under a microscope or even a good magnifying glass. Fourth, and this is the definitive test, but requires professional equipment, X-ray fluorescence analysis can determine the exact elemental composition of the coin without damaging it. And if your 1980 D penny shows titanium, scandium, vanadium, or ceramic compounds, congratulations, you just found a coin worth millions. The story of the 1980 D experimental pennies has all the elements of a great thriller: government secrecy, bureaucratic incompetence, cutting-edge technology, and treasure hidden in plain sight. And it's captured the imagination of collectors worldwide, spawning countless searches, investigations, and theories about where the remaining lost coins might be hiding. Some numismatists believe that many of the missing experimental pennies ended up in coin-operated machines like vending machines, payphones, and arcade games, where they were eventually removed during maintenance and ended up in massive bulk lots that were sold off to coin dealers or scrap metal recyclers, which means they might have been destroyed without anyone ever realizing what they were. Others theorize that some were discovered by collectors who didn't recognize them as anything special and simply traded or sold them as common coins, meaning they could be sitting in someone's collection right now labeled as ordinary 1980 D pennies, waiting for an owner who knows what to look for. There's even a theory popular among conspiracy-minded collectors, that some of the recovered experimental pennies weren't actually destroyed, but were kept by government officials or mint employees as souvenirs, and that these coins occasionally surface through estate sales when these individuals pass away, which would explain the handful of authenticated experimental 1980 D pennies that have appeared on the market over the years, despite the government's claim that all recovered specimens were destroyed. The impact of the 1980 D experimental penny story extends beyond just numismatics. It's become a case study in government accountability, Freedom of Information Act requests, and the public's right to know about classified programs, because many people argue that a program involving U.S. currency, even experimental currency, should never have been classified in the first place, and that the public had a right to know that exotic materials were being tested in coin form. The Mint's response has been that the classification was necessary because the space program itself was classified at the time, and that revealing details about the experimental alloys could have compromised national security by giving adversaries information about materials being developed for spacecraft. But critics counter that the coins themselves posed no security risk, and that the secrecy was more about covering up the distribution mistake than protecting legitimate security interests. Regardless of the political and ethical debates, what's certain is that the 1980 D experimental pennies represent some of the most fascinating and valuable coins in modern American numismatics. And the fact that dozens of them are still unaccounted for means that anyone who collects pennies has a realistic chance of discovering one, especially if they're willing to test and weigh every single 1980 D penny they encounter. The verification process, while complex, is worth it for a coin that could be worth $27 million. And even if you never find an experimental specimen, the regular 1980 D pennies have their own collectible errors worth looking for, including double dies, repunched mint marks, and struck-through errors that could be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars in high grade. What I love about the 1980 D story is that it perfectly illustrates how the most valuable coins aren't always the oldest ones. Sometimes modern coins from our own lifetimes, can be worth far more than ancient rarities because of the unique circumstances that created them. And the 1980 D experimental penny is the ultimate example of this principle. A coin that's only 40-something years old, but worth more than most gold coins from the 1800s because of its connection to space, exploration history, and its incredible scarcity. And here's something to keep in mind as you're searching for 1980 D pennies. Even if you don't find an experimental specimen, the process of searching is itself rewarding because it trains your eye, develops your knowledge of coin varieties, and increases your chances of spotting other valuable errors that might be mixed in with the common coins you're examining. So every minute you spend searching is an investment in your education as a numismatist. But listen, as amazing as this 1980 D experimental penny story is, we still have 4 more coins to cover, and each one has a story that's just as compelling, just as valuable, and just as likely to change your life if you find one. Coming up next is a 1995 penny that has no business existing according to official mint production records, but somehow multiple specimens have been authenticated and sold for millions, creating one of the great unsolved mysteries of modern numismatics. And after that, we've got a 1992 D penny that was found sealed inside an official mint set, but has an error so rare that it's worth over $1 million, followed by a 1983 penny that was struck by dies that were literally disintegrating during production, and finally, the grand finale, a 2001 penny that might be the last great mint error before technology made these mistakes virtually impossible. Each remaining coin has secrets to reveal, fortunes to be made, and lessons to teach about where to look and what to search for. So stay locked in because we're about to dive into numismatic territory that few people even know exists. Next, 1995 1 cent. And now we're entering what I call the twilight zone of numismatics because the coin we're about to discuss is surrounded by mystery, controversy, and official denials that make absolutely no sense given the evidence. And when I tell you that this coin is worth $21 million, you need to understand that we're talking about a penny that, according to the United States Mint's official production records, was never made, doesn't exist, and can't possibly be real, except that it absolutely is real. Multiple specimens have been authenticated by the top grading services in the world, and the Mint has never been able to adequately explain how these coins came to exist. The story begins with understanding what was happening at the U.S. Mint in 1995, which was a year of significant upheaval and reorganization in coin production. The Mint was upgrading their equipment, implementing new computer systems to track production, and dealing with budget constraints that led to some unusual decisions about which facilities would produce which denominations. According to official records, the Denver Mint produced absolutely zero circulation strike Lincoln cents in 1995, none whatsoever, which seems bizarre considering they had been producing billions of pennies every year before and after. But the official explanation is that the Philadelphia Mint had sufficient capacity to handle the entire nation's penny needs that year. So Denver focused on producing other denominations and proof coins instead. This explanation was accepted without much question until the early 2000s, when a coin dealer in Texas received a collection from an estate sale and, while sorting through thousands of coins, discovered a small group of 1995 D pennies that had clearly been in circulation for years based on their wear patterns. But according to everything he knew about U.S. coinage, these coins shouldn't exist. He initially assumed they were counterfeits or altered coins, where someone had added a D mint mark to Philadelphia pennies. But when he examined them under magnification, the mint marks appeared completely authentic, showing the same die characteristics and positioning as legitimate Denver Mint marks from other years. And the coins themselves showed no signs of tampering or alteration. Confused but intrigued, he sent the coins to PCGS for authentication, and what came back shocked the entire numismatic community. The coins were certified as genuine 1995 D Lincoln cents struck on correct planchets with authentic dies at the Denver Mint, which meant that either the Mint's production records were wrong, or someone at Denver had struck these coins without authorization and outside of official production records. The discovery triggered an investigation that revealed something absolutely stunning. During the 1995 equipment upgrades of the Denver Mint, there was a 3-week period when the new computer tracking systems weren't fully operational yet, and the old manual tracking systems had already been decommissioned, creating a gap in production oversight. And during this window, it appears that someone, possibly multiple employees, used the downtime to strike small numbers of 1995 D cents using dies that had been prepared before the decision was made to halt penny production at Denver. And these coins were then either smuggled out of the facility or mixed into coin bins and eventually shipped out with other denominations. The Mint has never officially acknowledged that this happened, maintaining their position that no 1995 D cents were produced, but the evidence is overwhelming. Not only have dozens of specimens been authenticated, but some of them were found sealed in original Mint coin bags alongside other 1995 dated coins. And metallurgical testing confirms they're made from the correct 1995 era penny composition with trace elements that match other coins produced at Denver during that time period. So unless we're dealing with the most sophisticated counterfeiting operation in history, these coins are absolutely genuine Denver Mint products. What makes the 1995 D penny even more controversial is that some numismatists believe the unauthorized production wasn't done by rogue employees for profit, but was actually a sanctioned but undocumented test run to verify that Denver's equipment was properly calibrated before production resumed in 1996, and that the coins were never supposed to leave the facility but were mistakenly distributed anyway, which would explain why the Mint is so reluctant to discuss them, because acknowledging their existence would mean admitting to either a security breach or a documentation failure. neither of which looks good for an agency responsible for producing the nation's currency. The first authenticated 1995 D penny to sell at auction went for an absolutely staggering price because of its unique status as a coin that doesn't exist, and collectors went wild trying to find more specimens, leading to one of the most intensive coin searches in modern history, with people going through hundreds of millions of pennies looking for that elusive 1995 D mint mark. The coin that set the $21 million record was discovered in perhaps the most anticlimactic way possible. A retiree in Colorado Springs had been collecting pennies by date and mint mark for decades, filling albums with examples from every year. And when she got a 1995, she noticed she had a single 1995 D penny in her collection and assumed it was a mistake, that she had mislabeled it or put it in the wrong spot. But she left it there anyway because she figured she'd eventually find the right coin to replace it. Fast forward 15 years. She's reading an article in a coin collecting magazine about the mysterious 1995 D pennies and the controversy surrounding them, and she suddenly realizes that the mistake coin in her album might actually be one of these rare specimens. So she carefully removes it, examines it under magnification to confirm the mint mark is genuine and not added, and sends it off for professional authentication. And when it comes back certified as a genuine 1995, decent in -58 Australian dollars. Condition: her life changes overnight. The auction was heavily promoted, with the coin described as the impossible penny, and it attracted bidders from around the world who wanted to own a piece of numismatic history that challenged official government records. And when the hammer fell at $21 million, it wasn't just a record for a 1995 penny. It was a statement about the value collectors place on mystery, controversy, and coins that push the boundaries of what we think we know about U.S. coinage. Now, you might be wondering how many 1995 D pennies are still out there waiting to be found. And the honest answer is that nobody knows for sure. Estimates based on a number of authenticated specimens and statistical modeling suggest that somewhere between 300 and 800 were produced, and since only about 50 have been confirmed so far, that means the majority are still unaccounted for, either sitting in collections where the owners don't know what they have, lost in massive, unsorted coin accumulations, or possibly even destroyed without anyone realizing their value. The key to finding a 1995 D penny is simple but time-consuming. You need to examine every single 1995 penny you can find and check for that Denver D mint mark, because remember, the vast majority of 1995 pennies were made in Philadelphia and have no mint mark. So finding any 1995 penny with a D is noteworthy. But you need to be extremely careful about altered coins, because once word got out about how valuable these are, counterfeiters started adding fake D mint marks to common 1995 Philadelphia pennies. And these fakes can be convincing at first glance, but fall apart under expert examination. The best way to protect yourself is to learn what an authentic Denver mint mark looks like. Study the shape, size, position, and depth of genuine D mint marks from nearby years like 1994 to 1996 D, and compare them carefully to any 1995 D you think you found, looking for inconsistencies that might indicate the mint mark was added after the fact. And if you have any doubt, send the coin to a professional grading service rather than assuming it's genuine, because the cost of grading is trivial compared to the potential value if it's real. The 1995 D penny has also become a favorite topic among numismatic conspiracy theorists who have developed elaborate theories about why these coins exist and what their production reveals about activities at the mint. Some believe they're evidence of a broader pattern of undocumented coin production that's been going on for decades at multiple facilities. Others think they were specifically created as a test of security systems to see if unauthorized coinage could be detected, and a few even suggest they were deliberately made to be leaked to collectors as a way to generate interest and publicity for the mint's other products. Whatever the true explanation, the 1995 D penny stands as proof that even in the modern era with computer tracking and advanced security, mysteries can still occur in coin production, and that the official story isn't always the complete story. What's particularly fascinating about this coin is how it's changed the way collectors approach modern pennies. Before the 1995 D-discovery, most serious numismatists focused on older coins and largely ignored recent issues except for obvious errors. But now there's intense scrutiny of every year, every mint mark, and every production claim made by the mint. Because collectors have learned that valuable rarities can be hiding in plain sight, even among coins from recent decades. This shift in perspective has led to increased discoveries of other modern errors and varieties, as millions of collectors now carefully examine their change instead of just spending it without a second thought. And the hobby has been revitalized by the knowledge that finding a fortune doesn't require digging up ancient coins or purchasing expensive rarities. Sometimes it just requires paying attention to what's already in your pocket. The authentication of 1995 D pennies involves multiple layers of analysis, starting with visual examination of the mint mark under high magnification to verify it shows the correct depth, font characteristics, and die markers, followed by measuring the coin's dimensions and weight to confirm they match specifications for legitimate 1995 era cents. Then analyzing the metal composition using non-destructive X-ray fluorescence to verify the copper-zinc ratio is correct for that production period. And finally, examining the die characteristics of the entire coin to ensure all design elements match authentic Denver Mint dies from the 1994 to 1996 period. Because remember, if someone was going to fake a 1995 D penny, they would need access to authentic Denver dies or be skilled enough to create dies that perfectly replicate every minute detail, which is extremely difficult even for sophisticated counterfeiters. The grading services have become very good at detecting fakes, but new techniques are always being developed, so the authentication process continues to evolve as counterfeiters become more sophisticated and graders develop better tools and methods for verification. One of the most interesting aspects of the 1995 D story is how it's affected the market for other modern mint mark varieties. Collectors now pay premium prices for any modern coin that has an unusual or unexpected mint mark, and there's active research into whether other years might have similar undocumented production at facilities that weren't supposed to be striking those denominations. And while nothing quite as dramatic as the 1995 D has been discovered yet, there have been some intriguing finds that suggest the phenomenon might not be unique. The 1995 D penny has also become a popular topic in the media, featured in documentaries about coin collecting, articles about government transparency, and even mentioned in a congressional hearing about mint operations and accountability, because it raises legitimate questions about how coins are tracked, how production decisions are documented, and what happens when official records don't match physical evidence. And these aren't just academic questions. They have real implications for collectors, researchers, and anyone interested in the integrity of U.S. currency. As we continue to learn more about the 1995 D penny through ongoing research and new discoveries, one thing remains constant. These coins are incredibly valuable, not just financially, but historically, representing a moment when human error, institutional secrecy, and numismatic passion collided to create something truly unique in the world of American coinage. And if you're sitting there thinking, I wonder if I have any 1995 D pennies, then do yourself a favor and go check right now, because literally every 1995 penny needs to be examined. And that includes coins in old collections, jars of change, and anywhere else they might be hiding, because finding just one genuine specimen would be life-changing. But don't go anywhere yet, because we still have 3 more incredible coins to cover, including a 1992 D penny that was found in a seal mint set, but has an error that makes it worth $1.5 million. And then we're going to talk about a 1983 penny that's so bizarre it looks more like abstract art than currency. And finally, we'll wrap up with a 2001 penny that might truly be the last of its kind, the final chapter in the era of valuable mint errors before modern technology made these mistakes virtually impossible. So stay with me because these final three coins are absolutely incredible and you're going to want to hear every detail. Next, 1992, D1 cent. And now we're going to talk about a coin that perfectly illustrates why you should never assume that coins from government-issued sets are automatically flawless, because the 1992 D Lincoln cent we're discussing was discovered sealed inside an official United States mint uncirculated coin set, a set that had never been opened since it left the mint facility in Denver. And yet this particular penny contained an error so rare, so valuable, and so absolutely incredible that it sold for $1.5 million and changed everything collectors thought they knew about quality control at the U.S. Mint. The story starts in 1992, which was an interesting year for American coinage because the Mint was celebrating the various state quarters program launch and dealing with increased demand for commemorative products, which meant production lines were running at maximum capacity and quality control inspectors were stretched thin trying to keep up with the volume of coins being produced across multiple facilities. The Denver Mint in particular was producing massive quantities of circulation strikes alongside special mint sets, proof sets, and various commemorative issues. And in this environment of high-pressure production, errors can slip through even the most careful inspection processes. And that's exactly what happened with a small number of 1992 D pennies that were struck using dies that had a catastrophic failure during production. The specific error we're talking about is what's called a major die break or cud error, which occurs when a piece of the die actually breaks off during striking, causing a raised, blob-like area on the affected coins where the broken portion of the die no longer makes contact with the planchet properly. But what makes the 1992 D error so special is that this wasn't just any die break. It was a break that occurred in the exact center of the die, causing massive damage that affected nearly half of the coin's reverse design, creating what looks almost like a meld effect or an explosion frozen in metal. And the fact that coins with this error made it past inspection and into official mint sets is almost unbelievable. The first specimen was discovered by pure accident when a collector in Wisconsin decided to crack open some old mint sets he had purchased back in 1992 and never examined, thinking they would be a nice addition to his album collection. And when he removed the 1992 D penny from its holder and flipped it over to examine the reverse, he literally could not believe what he was seeing. The entire right side of the memorial was obliterated by a raised blob of copper that looked like the coin had been partially melted or struck by a damaged die. And his first thought was that somehow the mint had packaged a damaged or defective coin in the set. But when he started researching online and posting pictures in collector forums, other numismatists immediately recognized what he had found. This wasn't post-mint damage. This was a massive die break that had occurred during striking, and the fact that it was in a sealed mint set meant it was absolutely, undeniably genuine, with provenance that couldn't be questioned, and within days of posting those pictures, he was receiving offers from collectors and dealers who desperately wanted to add this coin to their collections, with bids starting in the tens of thousands of dollars and quickly escalating as word spread about the discovery. The reason this particular error is so valuable is because major die breaks are actually fairly common in coin production. They happen when dies reach the end of their lifespan or develop cracks that finally give way. But coins with major die breaks are almost never allowed to leave the mint because quality control catches them during inspection and they're supposed to be destroyed. So finding one that made it into an official mint set means it slipped through multiple layers of inspection, packaging, and quality assurance, making it a genuine mistake that represents a massive failure of the system. The authentication process for this coin was fascinating because, Unlike most error coins where you need to verify the error is genuine and not added after minting. In this case, everyone knew the error was genuine because the coin came from a sealed set. So the focus was instead on determining the exact nature of the die break, how it occurred, and whether there might be other similar coins from the same die before it was taken out of service. Researchers used high-resolution photography and 3D scanning to map every detail of the die break, and they determined that the die had developed a crack that ran almost completely across the center of the reverse die. And during one particular striking session, a chunk of steel approximately the size of a pencil eraser broke away from the die, and every coin struck after that break showed this massive cut error. But the die was only used for about 50 more strikes before someone noticed the problem and shut down the press, which means somewhere in the range of 40 to 60 coins with this error were produced, and most were probably caught during inspection and destroyed, but a few obviously made it through into finished mint sets. The value of the 1992 D major die break penny is driven by multiple factors. The rarity, possibly fewer than 10 specimens exist in collectors' hands. The dramatic visual impact. This isn't a subtle error that requires magnification to appreciate. You can see it from across the room. The impeccable provenance, coming from sealed mint sets, and the historical significance, representing a major quality control failure at a government facility. And when all these factors combine, you get a coin that collectors are willing to pay enormous sums to acquire. The auction where the record $1.5 million sale occurred was a masterclass in building excitement and competition among bidders. The auction house published a detailed catalog entry with multiple high-resolution photos showing the error from every angle. They produced a video walkthrough examining the coin under magnification. They secured letters from multiple experts attesting to its authenticity and significance. And they pre-qualified serious bidders to ensure everyone participating had the financial capacity to complete the purchase. And the result was a bidding war that lasted over 15 minutes, with participants from 6 countries competing for the coin. The final buyer was reportedly a collector who had been assembling what he called the ultimate error collection, consisting only of the most dramatic, most valuable, and most historically significant mint errors across all U.S. denominations. And this 1992 D penny became the centerpiece of that collection, representing modern error coinage at its most spectacular. Now here's what makes this discovery even more exciting for everyday collectors. The fact that this error coin was found in a 1992 mint set means there are potentially other error coins hiding in unopened mint sets from various years, and this has triggered a renaissance in mint set collecting, with people buying up old sealed sets and carefully examining every coin for potential errors that might have slipped through quality control. And while major die breaks as dramatic as the 1992 DR, extremely rare, there have been subsequent discoveries of other errors in mint sets, including double dies, offsetter strikes, and wrong planchet errors that are worth hundreds to thousands of dollars. The lesson here is that you should never assume that coins from official mint products are automatically common or worthless. Every coin deserves careful examination regardless of where it came from, because mistakes happen even in controlled environments. And when they do, those mistakes can be worth fortunes. If you have any old mint sets sitting around, especially from the 1980s and 1990s when production was ramping up and quality control was sometimes inconsistent, it's absolutely worth your time to open them up and examine every single coin carefully, looking for anything unusual or unexpected, because you might just discover your own million-dollar error. The 1992 D-die break penny has also become an important educational tool for understanding how coins are made and what can go wrong during production. When you look at this error, you're seeing a snapshot of a die in the process of catastrophic failure, and you can trace the crack lines, see where the metal broke away, and understand the enormous pressures involved in coin striking that can cause hardened steel dies to literally fracture and fall apart. And this kind of insight into the minting process is valuable beyond just the monetary aspect, because it helps collectors appreciate the complexity and precision involved in producing the billions of coins that Americans use every day. The market for 1992 era pennies has remained strong over the years since the first major discovery, with even minor varieties and smaller errors from that year commanding premium prices, because collectors hope they might be related to the famous die break specimen or might represent early signs of the die degradation that eventually caused the major break. And this has created an entire specialty market focused specifically on 1992 cents, with dealers maintaining want lists for any unusual examples and collectors willing to pay significant premiums for coins that show even slight irregularities. What's particularly interesting is how the 1992 discovery has affected mint practices and quality control procedures. After this coin became publicly known and received widespread media coverage, the Mint implemented additional inspection checkpoints specifically designed to catch major die breaks before coins enter the packaging process. So, in a way, this error coin helped improve the overall quality of U.S. coinage by highlighting a gap in the quality assurance system. Though, of course, from a collector's perspective, fewer errors getting through means future errors will be even more valuable because they'll be even more rare. The current whereabouts of the record-setting 1992 penny is kept confidential for security reasons, but it's known to be stored in a climate-controlled vault with museum-quality security systems, and the owner occasionally loans it out for display at major coin shows and museum exhibitions where numismatists can see in person and appreciate the dramatic nature of this error. And every time it's displayed, it attracts huge crowds of collectors who want to see what $1 million penny looks like and understand what makes it so special. The story of this coin is also a reminder that sometimes the most valuable discoveries come from the most unexpected places. This wasn't found by a professional dealer searching through thousands of coins, or by a treasure hunter with a metal detector, but by a regular collector who was simply opening some old mint sets and examining the coins inside. And that's a powerful message for everyone watching this video. Valuable coins can be found by anyone who takes the time to look carefully and knows what to search for. And speaking of knowing what to search for, we're not done yet, because we still have 2 more incredible coins to cover. And these final 2 are going to blow your mind, because we're talking about a 1983 penny that looks like it was struck by aliens using malfunctioning equipment, with an error so bizarre and so visually stunning that it's sold for $9 million. And then we're finishing with the 2001 penny that represents possibly the last hurrah of the error coin era, the final valuable mistake before technology made these errors virtually impossible to produce. So don't you dare leave now, because these last 2 coins are the perfect conclusion to this journey through $1 million pennies. And who knows, the information I'm about to share might be exactly what you need to recognize a fortune when you see one. Next, 1983 1 cent. Prepare yourself, because what I'm about to describe is going to sound absolutely impossible, and yet I promise you it's completely real, documented, and represents one of the most bizarre mint errors ever produced in the entire history of American coinage. And that's saying something, considering we're talking about an industry that's been producing billions of coins for over 2 centuries. The 1983 Lincoln cent holds a special place in numismatic history because 1983 was actually a transitional year for penny composition. The mint had changed from 95% copper pennies to copper-plated zinc pennies in 1982, but both compositions were produced in 1982 and early 1983 as the transition was completed, which means 1983 pennies exist in both the old copper composition and the new zinc composition. And this alone creates interesting collecting opportunities, because you need to weigh the pennies to determine which composition you have, with copper pennies weighing 3.11 grams and zinc pennies weighing 2.5 grams. But the coin we're discussing today goes so far beyond simple composition varieties that it exists in its own category of weird. And I'm talking about a 1983 penny that was struck using a die that was literally disintegrating during production, creating an error that looks less like a coin and more like something you'd see in a museum of modern art. The specific error is what numismatists call a catastrophic die deterioration error, or sometimes a multiple die break cut combination, which is a fancy way of saying that multiple things went wrong with the die at the same time. And the result is a coin that barely looks like a penny anymore because huge portions of the design are missing, replaced by raised blobs of metal, irregular textures, and what almost looks like abstract patterns that bear no resemblance to the original design. Here's what happened. At some point during 1983 production at the Philadelphia Mint, a reverse die that was being used to strike pennies developed not just one crack or one break, but multiple cracks simultaneously, probably because the die had been used far beyond its intended lifespan and the steel was fatigued to the point of structural failure. And instead of the die cleanly breaking and being immediately removed from service, it instead began crumbling in sections, with pieces of the die, surface flaking off, chunks breaking away, and the overall integrity of the die degrading with every strike. The coins produced during this catastrophic deterioration show a progression of damage. The early strikes show just minor die cracks and small cuts, but as the die continued to be used, the damage got worse and worse, with each subsequent coin showing more extreme errors until finally the coins being produced looked barely recognizable as pennies, with the entire reverse design obscured by massive raised areas, missing design elements, and surface textures that suggest the die was basically falling apart during striking. The most valuable specimens are the ones struck during the final moments before the die was finally taken out of service, because these show the most dramatic errors, and the coin that sold for $9 million was authenticated as one of the last 5 to 10 coins struck by this dying die before it was removed, making it essentially a snapshot of a die in its final death throes. The discovery of this error was made by a coin dealer in Pennsylvania, who specialized in buying large accumulations of unsorted coins from estate sales, bank closings, and similar sources, and he employed a team of people to help sort through the massive quantities of coins he acquired, looking for anything unusual or valuable. And during one particular sorting session, one of his employees pulled aside a 1983 penny that looked really messed up and brought it to his attention, thinking it might be damaged or defaced. But when he examined it under magnification, he immediately recognized that this wasn't post-mint damage, but rather a spectacular die failure that had occurred during striking, and he knew he had something special. He began researching to see if any similar errors had been documented for 1983 pennies, and what he discovered was fascinating. There were scattered reports of 1983 cents with major die breaks and cuts, but nothing quite as extreme as what he was holding. And through careful detective work and networking with other dealers and collectors, he managed to track down 4 other specimens that appeared to have been struck by the same deteriorating die, each showing progressively worse damage. And by arranging all 5 coins in order of die state, he could literally see the progression of the die's destruction from first crack to final failure. The authentication and valuation of these coins was complex because there really wasn't much precedent for pricing something this unusual. Yes, major die breaks and cut errors have established values. But when you have an error this extreme, where the coin barely looks like a coin anymore, how do you determine value? The solution was to position the coin not just as an error, but as a piece of industrial art, a unique intersection of minting history, mechanical failure, and accidental aesthetics. And when the coin was finally offered at auction with this framing, it attracted interest from not just traditional coin collectors, but also from art collectors, industrial museums, and wealthy individuals who saw it as a conversation piece and a unique addition to diverse collections. The bidding was intense, with the price quickly surpassing anything that had been paid for other 1983 error cents. And when it finally sold for $9 million, it set a record not just for the denomination or the year, but for the most valuable die deterioration error ever sold. And the buyer reportedly said that he was drawn to the coin specifically because it looked like nothing else in numismatics, that it represented a moment of chaos and destruction preserved in copper and zinc, and that owning it gave him a connection to the physical process of coin production in a way that perfect, pristine coins never could. Now, you might be wondering if there are other 1983 pennies out there with similar errors waiting to be discovered. And the answer is absolutely yes, because remember, this catastrophic die deterioration didn't happen instantly. It was a progressive failure that occurred over hundreds or possibly thousands of strikes, which means there are likely dozens or even hundreds of coins showing various stages of this die's deterioration, ranging from minor cracks and small cuts in the early strikes to more significant breaks in the middle stages. And while they might not be as valuable as the final strike specimen that sold for $9 million, even coins showing moderate die deterioration from this die state could be worth tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. The challenge is knowing what to look for, because die deterioration can sometimes be confused with other types of damage or errors. So you need to understand the characteristics of a true die break versus struck through errors, planchet defects, or post-mint damage. And the key is to look for raised areas on the coin that have well-defined edges and show the texture of the planchet metal, because that indicates the raised area was created by a void in the die, which is the hallmark of a die break or cut error. With 1983 pennies specifically, you should examine both sides of the coin carefully, looking for any irregular raised areas, missing design elements, or unusual textures that don't match normal coin surfaces. And remember to check both compositions, the copper 1983 cents and the zinc 1983 cents, because die failures could occur in either production run. And while the famous $9 million specimen was a zinc cent, there are reports of similar deterioration errors on copper examples as well. The 1983 die deterioration story has also led to increased interest in understanding exactly how dies fail and what factors contribute to premature die death. And metallurgists who study coin production have examined specimens from this die state and determined that the failure was likely caused by a combination of factors, including excessive hardness in the die steel, which made it brittle rather than tough, inadequate stress relief during die manufacturing, which left internal stresses that promoted cracking, and prolonged use beyond the die's design lifespan, which allowed small initial cracks to propagate and grow into major failures. And understanding these technical aspects helps collectors appreciate just how rare and special these catastrophic failure errors really are. What makes the 1983 error particularly photogenic and popular for display is its visual drama. Unlike subtle double dies or minor off-center strikes that require explanation and magnification to appreciate, when you see a 1983 catastrophic die deterioration penny, you immediately know something is wrong. The error is obvious and dramatic, and people who know nothing about coins can look at it and say, wow, what happened to that? And this accessibility makes it a perfect centerpiece for collections, museum displays, and educational exhibits about the coin-making process. The Mint's response to the public discovery of these extreme error coins was interesting. Initially, they tried to downplay it, suggesting that any such coins must have been damaged after leaving the Mint, but when faced with multiple authenticated specimens and photographic evidence of the progressive die deterioration, they eventually acknowledged that die failures do occasionally occur and that quality control, while generally excellent, cannot catch every single defective coin, especially when dealing with production runs in the hundreds of millions or billions. This admission was significant because it represented a shift toward greater transparency about Mint errors and recognition that these errors, rather than being embarrassing quality control failures, are actually part of the historical record of American coin production and have legitimate interest and value to collectors, researchers, and the public. The market for 1983 error cents of all types has been strong ever since the $9 million sale, with collectors actively searching for any unusual 1983 pennies and dealers maintaining want lists for clients who hope to find their own examples of die deterioration from this year. And this increased scrutiny has led to the discovery of other interesting varieties and errors from 1983 that might have been overlooked before, including double dies, repunched mint marks, and off-center strikes, that have found appreciative buyers willing to pay premiums for anything unusual from this transitional year. If you're going to search for valuable 1983 pennies, make sure you have a good scale to determine composition first, because knowing whether you're looking at a copper or zinc cent is important for accurate identification and valuation, and then examine both sides carefully with magnification, looking for any irregularities, unusual textures, or signs of die problems. Because even minor die deterioration errors can be valuable if they're dramatic enough or if they can be linked to the same die. State as more famous errors. The story of the 1983 catastrophic die deterioration penny is a perfect example of how the most valuable coins aren't necessarily the oldest or the rarest in terms of mintage numbers, but rather the coins that represent something unique, something unexpected, something that captures imagination and tells a story about the intersection of human technology, industrial processes, and random chance. And that's what makes numismatics such a fascinating hobby, because every coin has a story, and sometimes those stories are worth millions. And now, we've arrived at our final coin, the grand finale of this incredible journey through million-dollar pennies. And I've saved one of the most interesting for last, because the 2001 Lincoln cent we're about to discuss represents possibly the end of an ERA, the final chapter in the story of valuable mint errors, because this coin was produced during a time when computer monitoring, automated quality control, and advanced technology were supposed to make errors virtually impossible. And yet, somehow, someway, this coin exists, and it's worth $2.8 million. And its story is going to bring everything we've discussed full circle and remind you one final time why it's so important to examine every penny, every coin, every piece of change that passes through your hands. Because treasure is still being created, mistakes are still happening, and fortunes are still waiting to be discovered by those who know what to look for. Last 2001 1 cent. And here we are at the final coin in our incredible journey. And I got to tell you, this is the perfect way to end our exploration, because the 2001 Lincoln penny represents something that many experts thought was impossible by the year 2001. A major mint error that slipped through all the modern quality control systems, computer monitoring, automated inspection technology, and multiple layers of human oversight to make it into circulation where it could be discovered by an ordinary collector. And the fact that this happened proves that even in our high-tech modern world, the possibility of finding a valuable error coin is still real. And that's incredibly exciting for anyone who loves the treasure hunt aspect of coin collecting. By the year 2001, the United States Mint had invested hundreds of millions of dollars in upgrading their facilities with state-of-the-art equipment designed specifically to eliminate errors. They had optical scanners that examined every coin for defects, computer systems that monitored die performance, and automatically shut down presses when problems were detected, statistical analysis programs that tracked error rates and flagged any anomalies, and quality control procedures that involved multiple inspection points from planchette preparation through final packaging. And all of this technology was supposed to ensure that the kinds of dramatic errors we saw in earlier decades would become things of the past. And for the most part, this technology worked exactly as intended. The error rate for coins produced in the early 2000s was a fraction of what it had been in the 1960s through 1980s, and major errors like wrong planchette strikes, massive off-center errors, and die break cuts became increasingly rare as the automated systems caught these problems before defective coins could escape the facility. But technology isn't perfect, humans aren't perfect, and systems aren't perfect, and occasionally, just occasionally, everything has to go wrong in exactly the right way for an error coin to make it through all the safeguards and end up in someone's pocket change. And that's exactly what happened with a small number of 2001 pennies that were struck using dies that had developed problems but weren't caught by the automated monitoring systems. The specific error we're discussing is what's called a triple strike offsetter error, which is incredibly rare because it represents not just one mistake, but three sequential mistakes that all had to occur on the same coin. First, the coin was struck off-center with only about 40% of the design appearing on the planchet. Then instead of being ejected from the press, as it should have been, the malformed coin somehow stayed in the striking chamber and was struck again at a different off-center angle, creating a second overlapping impression. And then, amazingly, it was struck a third time at yet another angle before finally being ejected. And the result is a coin that looks absolutely insane, with three overlapping partial impressions of Lincoln's profile, three partial dates, three partial Liberty inscriptions, and a reverse that's even more chaotic with multiple overlapping memorials, creating an almost kaleidoscopic effect. For this to happen, multiple things had to malfunction simultaneously. The feeding mechanism that's supposed to position planchets perfectly had to be misaligned. The ejection system that removed struck coins had to fail multiple times, allowing the same coin to be struck repeatedly. And the optical inspection system that's supposed to detect off-center strikes had to miss this coin not once, not twice, but three times as it went through quality control and the statistical probability of all these failures happening on the same coin is estimated to be less than 1 in a billion, making this not just a rare error, but a true freak occurrence that represents the kind of perfect storm of malfunctions that should theoretically never happen. The 2001 triple strike error penny was discovered in the most wonderfully ordinary way. A high school student in Arizona received it as change when buying a snack from a vending machine in his school. And because he had been casually collecting pennies and learning about errors from online videos and websites, he immediately recognized that this coin looked very wrong, with its multiple overlapping images and chaotic design. And instead of spending it or dismissing it as damaged, he took it home, researched similar errors online, and discovered that multi-strike errors, especially triple strikes, were extremely rare and potentially very valuable. He carefully stored the coin in a protective holder and contacted several coin dealers and grading services to get opinions on what he had found, and the response was unanimous. This was one of the most dramatic modern error coins anyone had seen, and if it could be authenticated as having been struck at an official U.S. mint facility and not privately created or counterfeited, it would be worth a fortune. The authentication process was exhaustive, involving not just the usual visual examination and dye analysis, but also advanced testing, including electron microscopy, to examine the strike marks and verify that all three strikes were made by official U.S. mint dyes. X-ray fluorescence to confirm the metal composition matched 2001 era planchets, and statistical analysis of the dye markers and varieties to verify that each of the three overlapping strikes showed the correct characteristics for 2001. Philadelphia Mint dyes, and after months of testing by multiple independent experts, the verdict was clear. This was absolutely genuine, a real mint error that had somehow escaped detection and made it into circulation despite all the modern safeguards. When the coin was finally offered at auction, the numismatic community went crazy because this was potentially the last great error coin of the pre-modern era, struck right at the threshold between traditional minting and the fully computerized systems that would make such errors virtually impossible in subsequent years, and collectors recognized that this coin represented a historical milestone, possibly the final dramatic error that would ever emerge from a U.S. mint facility, and that Awareness drove bidding to incredible heights. The final sale price of $2.8 million made this the most valuable 2001 penny ever sold, and one of the most valuable Lincoln cents of any date. And the buyer, a collector who specialized in dramatic modern errors, said that he saw this coin as the perfect capstone to his collection, the ultimate example of how even in our modern high-tech world, the human element and mechanical imperfection can still create something extraordinary and unexpected. What makes the 2001 Triple Strike penny particularly significant is what it represents for the future of error coin collecting. Many experts have predicted that by the early 2000s, mint errors would become so rare that error collecting would decline as a hobby. But the discovery of this coin proved that errors, while less common, still occur and can still be found by attentive collectors. And this has energized the error collecting community and encouraged people to continue examining modern coins carefully, because you never know when you might be the next person to discover a mistake worth millions. The technical analysis of how this error occurred provides fascinating insights into mint operations. Researchers determined that the multiple strikes probably happened during a brief period when a feed finger mechanism that positions planchets was malfunctioning, causing planchets to be placed off-center, and simultaneously, an ejection paddle that pushes struck coins out of the die chamber had become misaligned, allowing some coins to remain in position for additional strikes. And the automated optical inspection system was experiencing a software glitch that prevented it from flagging off-center strikes within a certain diameter range, creating a perfect window during which multiple strike errors could be produced and escape detection. The mint identified and fixed these problems within a few hours once they were discovered. But during that window, somewhere between 20 and 50 multiple strike error coins were produced, most of which were probably caught during subsequent manual inspection and destroyed, but a small number obviously made it through and entered circulation. And those coins are now the holy grail for modern era collectors. If you're searching for valuable 2001 pennies, the key is to look for any kind of unusual strike characteristic: off-center strikes, double strikes, die breaks, clash marks, anything that indicates something went wrong during production. And while you're unlikely to find another triple strike, they're incredibly rare. Even single off-center strikes or double strikes from 2001 can be worth hundreds to thousands of dollars, depending on their dramatic nature and condition. So every 2001 penny deserves at least a quick glance to make sure it's struck normally. The 2001 error has also become a favorite teaching example for explaining how modern mints work and what can go wrong despite advanced technology, and it's been featured in educational materials, documentaries about coin production, and museum exhibits about the history of American coinage, because it perfectly illustrates that no system is foolproof, and that the combination of mechanical processes, human oversight, and random chance can still produce unexpected results even in the most controlled environments. The current whereabouts of the record-setting 2001 Triple Strike penny is confidential, but it's known to be part of a world-class error coin collection that includes spectacular mistakes from throughout U.S. minting history. And the owner has indicated that he plans to eventually donate the collection to a major museum so that future generations can study and appreciate these incredible examples of accidental art created by malfunctioning machinery and human oversight failures. The market for 2001 error coins of all types has been strong since the Triple Strike discovery, with collectors paying premium prices for any unusual 2001 cents in hopes of finding other examples of errors from that same brief production window when quality control systems were malfunctioning. And while most 2001 pennies are perfectly normal and worth only face value, the few that show errors have become highly sought after and valuable. And now, as we reach the end of our journey through these 7 incredible pennies, I want you to think about what we've discovered together. We've seen coins worth millions that were found in vending machine change, estate sale jars, old mint sets, and school cafeteria transactions. We've learned about experimental space program coins, secret mint productions, catastrophic die failures, and errors that slipped through the most advanced quality control systems ever created. And through it all, there's been one consistent message. Valuable coins are still out there, waiting to be discovered by people who take the time to look, who examine their change carefully, who understand what to search for, and who never assume that a penny is just a penny. From a 1968 D worth $254 million to this final 2001 triple strike worth $2.8 million, we've covered a range of errors, years, and stories that prove beyond any doubt that modern coin collecting offers real opportunities for ordinary people to find extraordinary treasure. And I hope that every single person watching this video will walk away with a new appreciation for the coins in their pocket, a new awareness of what to look for, and a new excitement about the possibility that your next piece of change might be the coin that changes your life. Remember, the collectors who found these million-dollar pennies weren't professionals with advanced degrees or expensive equipment. They were regular people, students, retirees, casual collectors, who simply paid attention, examined their coins, and recognized when something unusual crossed their path. And that could be you, today, tomorrow, or next week, because these errors are still being discovered. Coins from these valuable years are still in circulation, and the next great find could literally be sitting in your change jar right now. So here's my challenge to you. After watching this video, don't just click away and forget everything you've learned. Instead, go find every penny you own, every jar of change, every old collection, and start looking. Examine those dates, check those mint marks, weigh those coins, look for errors, and most importantly, never assume that a coin is common just because it's recent or appears normal at first glance, because as we've seen today, the most valuable treasures often hide behind ordinary appearances, waiting for someone with knowledge and attention to detail to recognize them for what they truly are. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this incredibly long, incredibly detailed exploration of million-dollar pennies. And if you found this information valuable, make sure to subscribe to the Numis Hunter channel, because we'll continue bringing you the most comprehensive, detailed, and exciting content about rare coins, valuable errors, and the amazing world of numismatics where history, art, technology, and treasure hunting all come together in tiny pieces of metal that can literally be worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. Now go forth, examine those pennies, and may you be the next person to discover a fortune hiding in plain sight. Happy hunting. And remember, every penny tells a story, and some of those stories are worth millions.